Oh, people starting to show up. It's exciting. So exciting. Hello, everyone. Thank you for
Hello,
joining.
everyone.
How's it going?
Good. We're excited to have everyone here. So we're just going to give it a couple
Zoom is
minutes.
acting funny today, so if you don't
Zoom is
see
acting
us,
funny. Yeah, sorry about the switch on the Zoom link as well. And we're having some stuttery fun on Zoom, so it's all good. It's all good today. But rest assured, the internet is not breaking. It is handling the stream. All right. So we'll probably get several other folks, kind of rolling in here shortly. We were going to do everyone with video on, so we could do the nice little Brady Brunch wall screen, but with Zoom acting up, we've decided to disable everyone's video by default. You can feel free to try it on if you want, but we are seeing some Zoomy issues. So, but it is good to see you all. Like I said, apologize for the change in link, but hopefully everybody can keep up. We're going to be recording this, so those who weren't able to attend will get access to this afterwards. And so there's some smiling faces. So hello, everybody. And chat should be enabled for folks. So if you do have questions or do want to mention something, feel free to do so. So welcome to our second roundtable and the Yonk and PZ show, as we like to call this, with a special guest, Stuart. So we have with us our special guest, Stuart Bell, all the way from England. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, everybody.
And so Stuart is our support manager in EMEA. So he has been with us for a while. And fun fact about Stuart is everybody at Percona gets to buy their own laptop. And what kind of laptop did you buy, Stuart?
An Alienware.
Yeah, so Stuart decided to go for the gaming laptop for his primary work laptop, but that's cool, and so he brings it to like all of the in-person events, and he's got the big, Alienware rig, and it's kind of cool, and it makes me jealous sometimes because, who doesn't like, cool laptops and hardware, right?
And he's
business
getting
case.
so much exercise carrying that thing around.
It's not a 17-inch though, is it?
No. It's a 14-inch, but it's a 4K display, so it gives me lots of space to do things. That's the business reason for having it.
Oh, it's the business reason, right?
Oh, business reasons. Okay.
Yeah, that's the business reasons for having it is that. We'll go with that. So for those of you who didn't attend our last roundtable, just to give you kind of a heads up on what this is. So this is for us to give some thoughts, do some Q&A, we want this to be interactive. So feel free to post questions or comments as we go through this. This is supposed to be fun, that's why we wanted to do videos on, if Zoom will allow us to not stutter too much. But this is an open-ended, conversation. Think of this as almost like a live stream, if you will. It's open, right? So feel free to ask questions. And we want to all be able to connect because, a lot of us have been stuck in our houses for a really long time. And, I talked with someone this past week who said their adaptability battery is zero now because, for the last 2 months, they were totally adaptable to work from home. And now they are totally ready to just depart their house and go on. So what's new and what are we tracking? So restrictions are starting to be lifted. I don't know how many people here have had their restrictions lifted where they are. Is anybody doing anything interesting out there? I know that the interesting thing for me was I left the house a few times and I actually went for a drive. So it's not really exciting, but yeah. So we're all seeing a little things different, but You know, Stuart, what are you planning now? You know, things start getting lifted. You know, are your restrictions lifted, or are you still kind of like, I know like Boris, your guy over there was like, oh, we're going to start easing this.
Yeah. The only thing that's really changed as of Wednesday this week is that the restriction has been lifted to allow us to drive to places. So we can't visit friends and family. There's no restaurants, no pubs, no cinema, nothing. Nothing has changed. Everything is closed, except that they've told us we can't go for drives. You can't drive anywhere. That is going to be lifted on Wednesday, so we can actually go and drive to a park, and we can go and sunbathe in a park as long as we are within a social distance from other people. But they've made it very clear, you can't go on holiday, you can't go to a holiday home, you can't do anything, but you can drive to somewhere and do something somewhere as long as you're social distance away from everyone else.
Wow. Well, so here in North Carolina, where Peter and I are, we just opened up, and Peter actually already went on his adventures. So Peter started his adventures like as soon as like they said like you could start going out on Friday, and Saturday and Sunday he was not even like remotely close to that. He was gone. Like it's funny because over the weekend I'll get pinged by Peter like all the time, and this weekend it was like this is eerily silent. What's going on? So what did you get to do, Peter?
Well, what is North Carolina best for? Saturday in the mountains and Sunday on the beach.
Yeah, so you did Mother's Day on the beach, right, with your wife?
Yeah. So that's right. Yeah.
You're starting the Percona adventure team. I've seen like your posts and stuff.
Yeah.
Where you're taking willing subjects from Percona and making them march up mountains and stuff.
Oh yes, yes. Well, in fact, we were going to go with a few folks to the Indian Himalayas around the time we organized Percona University in India. But unfortunately, those plans were canceled or delayed, I would say, until the situation improved. So I just took that banner for my pretty lonely hike in local mountains. Much more smaller, but still beautiful.
You were trying to get Vadim to go with you, but he didn't.
Yes, yeah. No, Vadim didn't. He had some reasons not to go.
All right. Yeah, because I saw you with your banner on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I know. Like Val, who's on this call, she just had her restrictions lifted. She went out and she went on a picnic. I don't know if anybody has anything that their restrictions were lifted. They're looking forward to do something. Feel free to throw it in chat. But our other big thing that we're talking about this week is next week is Percona Live Online, and that's coming up. So we've got over 2,500 people registered, and if you haven't followed that yet, it is 24-hour around-the-clock conference. So every time zone, no matter where you live, there will be someone speaking live in your time zone, which is kind of cool. We're trying it out. We're going to hopefully the internet gods smile upon us and we have good bandwidth and nothing terrible. But that is next week, and so if you haven't pre-registered, you can. But we're really looking forward to that around-the-clock, around-the-world conference. Going to be super excited. And Bronwyn just posted in the chat. Hopefully everybody can see the chat if you wanted the link to that. So, as I mentioned, we've been having some Zoomy issues, right? And so, our first topic that we wanted to talk about today, and it's a bit of an extension from last week, is as COVID-19 killed the internet, because we've seen a lot of slowdowns continue over the last few months, and just when you think you're out of the woods, things start to impact us a little bit more. And this has been a topic that a lot of news coverage over the last week or two has started to pick up on. And the problem is nobody can really figure out whether it's breaking the internet, not breaking the internet. The internet's strong. It's kind of like all over the place, all in between. I know that we've had some things come up now and then with, customers, having issues with third-party providers. I know that, we've seen this kind of, is the internet under strain? Is it not? But what's kind of interesting is, we did this survey of, our users, and, people kind of fall into this realm of either they're seeing like a massive increase in traffic, or they're seeing, a massive decrease, or they're just the same, right? So you got this kind of quarter in each of the significance, and then, about 50% the same. But what's interesting is there is no like middle ground. It's not just a little bit of increase or a little bit of decrease. It's like it's immense on either side, right? And so we kind of see this fall into either one. And I don't know if you guys who are online have noticed that or seen that as well. Interested to hear from you guys there. But just in the last month, we've seen Google Cloud having several outages. We've had Zoom issues. We've had Microsoft Azure issues. We've had cloud outages from AWS. We've had Snapchat issues. Applications have been going out. So this has definitely been impacting people. But what's interesting is if you go back a year pre-COVID-19 and everything, these are the headlines from a year ago. And I presented this slide at Percona Live a year ago, right? So Facebook outage, Google outage, AWS outage, Alibaba outage, everybody was having outages. So I don't think that this is something that has, drastically increased or decreased since the outbreak. But it is something that, isn't getting fixed. I mean, over the course of a year, we're still seeing people suffer through outages and slowdowns across the board.
But now we have something to blame.
Oh, yes. Now we have a name. We have the boogeyman, right?
Yeah, we have something to blame, right? That's very valuable.
Yes, we can. Yeah. And, what's funny is, all these companies, it doesn't impact the bottom line. The revenue's still rolling in, right? So, I mentioned, Google and AWS still having some outages, and Microsoft, and, they're still seeing record revenues. But what are we seeing? So Stuart is our foremost expert on the call on support. And so we're curious, Stuart, tell us about what our customers are opening tickets on, and maybe tell us a little bit about, how support is, seeing the increase, what sort of things are happening?
Well, when COVID-19 sort of first hit, the world sort of didn't know what was going on, and support saw it go dead. We sort of went dead in support for about 3 days while people were trying to work out what was going on. And then directly after that, we saw a massive spike in contacts, and that was sort of mixed up with people playing catch up for the previous days when it had gone quiet. Then we had a bunch of performance-related tickets related to slowdowns. For online-based customers, seeing spikes in their own user activity. And then we saw customers looking to complete projects such as upgrades and migrations to make the most out of their quiet time due to international lockdowns. And nowadays, it's sort of business as usual. We've got a high level of contact, but it's sort of generalized now.
So Stuart, what's the most common issue that we're seeing nowadays, right? So what's popping up more than not?
The highest amount of tickets are to do with performance related issues. So it is generally high usage of spikes that they're seeing on their own hardware because of activity.
Well, that doesn't surprise anybody. Peter, does it surprise you?
No, not at all.
Mr. Performance Peter. Yeah. So how many of these are kind of focused around the cloud area? Do we have a lot of, I mentioned there was some cloud outages, there was, some slowdowns in the cloud that we saw, are we seeing, cloud type tickets?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, there's not necessarily an increase from what we normally see, but certainly some of the tickets are related to environments on the cloud platforms.
Yeah. And I see somebody mentioned that, performance-related issues are a topic of all my life work. So yeah, so I think that you can't move around, anytime without having to deal with performance issues, especially in the case where we see these giant spikes happen seemingly overnight. So the other topic that I've been tracking a bit, and we've got a lot of questions that we're going to answer too, but I wanted to talk a little bit about database leaks because I need a public service announcement. I do not need any more credit monitoring services. Please don't leak my data anymore. I am going to pass down when I die to my daughter years worth of free credit monitoring because I have had my data breached so much that she will now be able to cover most of her lifetime with free credit monitoring. I don't need it. People are leaking data still at an alarmingly frequent rate, right? And a lot of these are database related, issues. And what's funny is they're kind of avoidable, but I like this one up here with the GDPR compliance site leaks get data and passwords, right? You're a GDPR compliance website and you leak data. How does that happen, right? And this one happens to be a MySQL one, and it was a MySQL one where they didn't set a password. So not good. Typically, Mongo is the most leaked of the databases, or Elastic, and typically those two are leaked because that there's password or security issues. But again, this is something that we go back a year, and it's still trending from a year ago. That you had this, right? This is insane. That we've gone a whole year and people are still causing the same issues. So I have some questions. Are we seeing an increase? Are they getting worse? And I mean, personally, I think they're getting worse. I think that they're increasing. Peter, what are your thoughts on all these data leaks?
Well, I think it shows what it really takes. A long time to educate the user, right? And in my opinion, that is there are a lot of trends which are making that worse and harder, right? Because we have increasing complexity of deployments, right? If people using many different databases, all of those need different ways to secure that. And also, we have a lot of a database management kind of moves from professional operation focused people like DBAs to developers who believe they can self-manage. And in many cases they can, right? But if developer often gets permission issues on a database, what do? Hey, why don't I just, open it up, right?
And I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, as more people who don't understand the database infrastructure and security requirements to keep this safe, they spin up data. They a lot of them they just leave it out there, right? I mean, that's been a common problem as well. Somebody spins up an instance out in AWS, forgets to set a password, moves some data over, does some data analysis, leaves it on because we're all digital pack rats, and sometimes you forget things. Nobody has problems with EC2 instances running that they forgot about, right?
Yes, and I think, Matt, security in this case is kind of special because if you think about majority of the bugs in your application, right? If you make a mistake, your code doesn't work, right? Your boss see it, your users see that, and so on and so forth, right? If you make a lot of security mistakes, nobody sees that, right? It works for you, for your users, for your boss. It is just what the bad guys can get all your data, right? And that makes it much harder to test and much harder to think about, right? Because you need to be deliberate thinking about security. It doesn't happen by accident.
Well, I'll argue with you a little bit there. I think people do take notice. It's the hackers that take notice, though, unfortunately, and not the people in the companies, right? If you do leave these things open, then all of a sudden, your data is going to get leaked all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we got a question in. Do we think that database providers are overcomplicating database security and therefore creating these issues? Elastic, for instance, charging for security features. Peter, you want to jump in on that one, and I'll.
Yeah, I think that is that is an interesting point, right? Because if you look at a lot of high-end security features, they typically get to be targeted for by enterprise, right? And it's not just Elastic, but also if you think about MySQL or MongoDB has many advanced security features not available in kind of like a open source edition. In this case, right? That is a very very common. I think though is the basic security, right? Tends to be available even in community edition for most database systems, and I think majority of the security problems, right, and data leaks happen from getting those, not getting those leaks, those very basics right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the easy problems that typically plague people, and it's the things that are often overlooked. So I think that, there is a lot of decent, available security features. You just need to know how to use them. I've been kind of preaching this concept of, this data or this technology inheritance problem that we're seeing formulate and kind of come out on the scene lately, which is, a lot of IT departments are starting to inherit technologies and, things that they don't quite understand because their developers, their architects are starting to choose these technologies. They get passed down, and a lot of teams are unprepared for some of those technologies, right? Yeah. We also see that some of this is also caused by, not providing same defaults as, out of the box, right? There's some database technologies that just don't require things like passwords or, encryption by default, and those become optional even if they are included in that. So, I mean, it's something to keep in mind. Stuart, how often has your data been breached?
I'm quite good at keeping my data under wraps, so never.
Okay, I see. You see,
that sounds like a challenge. I mean, like, I wouldn't go out and say that because, like,
No, Matt. I think the point here is different, right? There are people who know that data is leaked, and there are people who are ignorant about such a fact.
Oh,
right.
I will say I have put my email address into these websites that tell you whether or not your account details have been given away in the past, and I can say that yes, my email address has appeared on those websites, and as a result, I've had to change a password here or there, but yes.
Yeah, so okay, look at that. Yes, after little pressure, Stuart acknowledges what he is not a data leak virgin.
There you go.
Yeah, and Matt, I think I had a good, interesting question in this case coming up in the chat about the what Elastic provides and what those kind of advanced security features which may be required, right? And I think that is something which would be very interesting for Elastic in particular, right? Because you probably know what there is also now open distro for Elastic, which Amazon has created, right? And obviously there are more things which will be restricted, especially security space, the more pressure it will create for somebody else to step up and create and create those features, right? I mean, frankly, we at Percona are doing that ourselves with MySQL and Oracle, right? And the MySQL Oracle includes a lot of advanced features like auditing, pluggable authentication only in Enterprise Edition. If you want them open source, you run Percona server for MySQL. We made it happen.
So I do have a solution though. So the good news is I have thought long and hard about this, and I have a solution that will solve 50% of all database breaches in the world. Are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? I could solve more than 50% on this call right now. All right, and I can do it in one line. You ready for it?
Please don't kill internet.
Yeah. Change your password. honestly, honestly, you know, I go back to like that slide that I had with all of those different, like, you know, data breach headlines, and more than 50% of them are, it was a MongoDB running without a password. If we can get that one line to be known and understood by everyone out in the industry, we can solve half of the database breaches in the world. So it will be, you know, awesome if we can start to preach that. So feel free to, you know, tweet that out, if you will. All right, so a couple more comments came in. You know, secure database server should be now first step of design implementation. But they're always at the end. That is true, right? Security is often the last thing people think about as opposed to secure by default. And that does change some things. Why not AD support? Why is it so complicated to set up? Well, I mean, Active Directory, but you also have LDAP. You also have advanced authentication. I think a lot of people reserve that as a quote unquote enterprise feature for advanced authentication. So it is something, you know, to do. And so, you know, also asked about MongoDB. Is there some way to provide a tool similar to MySQL secure installation? You know, hey, that's a good question. And yes, there are tools you can provide. There are some easy steps to do. And you know, hey, I'll even tell you that we're going to have an announcement next week to help solve a lot of these database breaches, not just Mongo, but other database breaches that occur as well. So, you know, come to Percona Live and learn about, you know, how we're going to help solve these database breaches as well.
Yeah. And I think, Matt, I want to mention something here, right? I think is what your advice is probably looks very kind of basic and borderline stupid for a lot of people on this call, right? Because it's so basic it is. But I think it's interesting what right now on this call, we probably have an interested minority, right? People who really want to learn and understand open source databases. And majority of databases in the database in the wild are run by ignorant minority. And they do actually need those very basic requirements as change your damn password. You don't, but they do.
Yeah. Well, and Stuart, good news. Yeah, you know, he called out the ignorant minority, you know, or majority, you know, in terms of developers. So you're good at company. So, but I agree with you, Peter. I do agree with you, right? Is, you know, this is where it's the easy stuff that causes most of the issues. A lot of people don't have full-time DBAs, right? And this is a fault of a lot of service providers because, you know, how often does everybody see the words fully managed around their environments nowadays, right? Like, and when, you know, a non-user, like, you know, a non-database user, a non-technical user, somebody who doesn't understand the technology sees fully managed, they think they click a button and it's turnkey. And, you know, we did a blog series, Michael Benschoof did a blog series for us, you know, about 3 months ago, where he talked about the shared responsibility model in the cloud. And he really highlighted the security side of things because, you know, there's this concept of fully managed, but then there's also this concept of shared responsibility, which is a nice way of saying, you know, yeah, you know, we have some things we're going to protect you from, but you also have to make sure that you have good practices. And it's a reasonable thing. You know, it doesn't take the onus from understanding the technology away from you, right? I think that's important. Right? And so, you know, great. So, you know, let's go to our questions from the audience. We've got a ton that were sent in ahead of time. So let's jump right in. And the first question is from Frank, who wants to talk about which open source database communities are the healthiest, and are there some that are better positioned than others? And Peter, knowing that the open source community is a great passion of yours for many, many years, I'm going to let you jump right into this and, you know, give us an answer.
Well, you should have allocated for me at least half an hour to talk about that.
You have 30 seconds, go.
But you did not. So I would say, in my opinion, the most healthy, like open source community, we focus at the open source in a database space, is Postgres, right? I think it is amazing to see so many PostgreSQL businesses, right, really focus it first and foremost at making PostgreSQL successful and making PostgreSQL pie bigger first, and a competition between themselves second, right? When we Percona started working with Postgres, we have been invited to, for example, so many conferences and events which have been put together by folks who would consider our competition, right, on the business sense. I think what is funny in this case is what if you look at MongoDB, who has a very, very restricted community, right? Unless you are sucking up to MongoDB Inc., right? It will be very hard for you to get access to MongoDB MongoDB community in this case, but their stock price is doing pretty well, right? And I think this is kind of a very, sad fact to me is what even right, what you especially kind of at least short term, right? You can be successful in the stock market with a database space, even if you don't give a shit about the open source nature of your community. And don't get me wrong, right? Open source MongoDB has community, and a lot of developers love it, but they don't go about it in an open source way.
So are you equating to healthier, better communities with more open?
What do you say?
Are you basically saying that the more open the community, the more open the software, the better, the more healthier the community? Are you kind of equating that? Because I noticed, we started as a MySQL company, and so the stock answer, everyone, probably a lot of people on this call would have expected you was MySQL would be the best community because you've been in it for so long. But to hear from you and to understand how we've been greeted with open arms in the Postgres community, to have it be Postgres, and having Postgres be this very open license, more open than MySQL's even, and definitely more open than Mongo's. Are you equating the healthier the ecosystem to being more open, and the more open the licenses?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just about the license. I think it's a significant expense to the governance, and also what there is not one dominating player in the PostgreSQL space, right? That is what makes it wonderful, right? Because I think there are many projects, right, for example, which are technically project itself is Apache license, members of Apache Foundation, so it's kind of similar, right? But then there would be only one or two company which completely dominate landscape, right? And right, and then they would not have as a vibrant community as Postgres. Right, because I think reality here is also this, right? As a community, it needs investment, and there's so many companies in PostgreSQL space, right? Each of them kind of looking to sort of like make a name for their own sake, right? In community, that kind of creates that. If you look at something like Oracle and MySQL, it is not how they go about market, right? A lot of that goes in the enterprise sales and what's not, right? So it's investing for community, I think, as they believe, is not as necessary for them.
Okay, great. So let's go to our next question. Next question is, what is the current state of using databases on Kubernetes? Is it ready for production? When will it be? This is from Rush. So, and I'm going to start with, I'm going to first start with our resident support expert, Mr. Stewart. Are we starting to see companies open up tickets and open up, support cases and starting to use Kubernetes?
Yeah. We've there's not a massive amount at the moment, but we've certainly seen these sorts of requests ramping up. yeah, like we had one today about packages on our Docker repos. So I mean, it is definitely something that is ramping up.
Yeah. Peter, what do you think? I mean, we are seeing the rise of Kubernetes. We've seen external places, and I pulled some data from different sources that show the growth of Kubernetes for databases is definitely growing. And in fact, it's the number 2, according to Datanami. They did a survey. It's the number 2 application for Kubernetes, or for Docker right now, for containers, is databases. So what do you see?
Yes, well, I think first you talk about the Kubernetes in production. The production is often overused term, right? And when you speak about production, some things you, hey, that is a mission critical many terabytes or petabytes database, right? And I think really the Kubernetes will take some time, right, to start running majority of those, the most high performance and the mission critical workloads. But reality is, if you look at the majority of the companies, a vast majority by the number of a database we have are pretty small, right? That is your, like a Jira database, Drupal database, some other application. And those are really fantastic even right now to be run at the Kubernetes, right? And we really see Kubernetes improving the database, improving the features which are important for database support very well on every release. The Kubernetes right now is much better for databases than it was 2 years ago, which was already like quite better than Kubernetes, in its early days, right, which was designed initially for stateless applications. So I mean, I think we're on the right track, and at Percona we have been building the Kubernetes operators now for quite a while. We recently released Percona XRB Cluster 8 with its Kubernetes operator, which has a lot of cool features, right, and really can help you to eliminate a lot of toil if you are running Kubernetes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that growth of the smaller databases and the databases in mass has really picked up. Our survey had more than 17% of companies that responded showed that they were running more than 1,000 databases in their environment. So as that scale starts to pick up, you're going to have a lot of smaller ones as well. So it's something to keep in mind. But moving on, because we've got quite a few questions, and we haven't even asked the people here online their questions yet. But let's move on to the next question. For the next question, Michael is curious how Percona's software helps improve and debug MySQL. And he also asked, on the cost benefits as well of Percona's software. So this is someone who I'm not 100% sure if they know who, about our software. So Peter, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how Percona software helps improve and debug MySQL.
Yeah, so if you look at Percona, for a long time we have been focusing on improving MySQL observability, because what we have spotted is what in many cases people do mistakes, right, or have a poor performance, not because the MySQL doesn't have the features, right, to get them a good performance, but just because they don't know how to go about that, or because they don't see what's going on. Right now, over years, a lot of stuff what initially came in Percona server for MySQL appeared in MySQL mainline, and frankly, right now you can see there is a lot of stuff which is available in MySQL internals, right, and performance schema, information schema, and so on. And what we have been focused more recently is making that information easy to see, easy to process, digest with our efforts with Percona monitoring and management, right? So that really helps you to get that information easier to use, right?
Okay, and so Peter, you gave your 4 tips for using Percona software for MySQL, and so I'll let you talk through this, but Want to throw it up?
Yeah, okay. So one thing I think, and this is probably so basic it will sound stupid for a lot of people, but in a lot of cases when you talk about people, what is your goals in terms of performance? Hey, what do you need here, right? Do you need, twice as much as performance? Are you looking to build something which is can handle 1,000 times scale? Right? Often it's not very clear for people, and that really defines a lot what would be appropriate setup, right? The second thing is you want to make sure to use the recent version, right? Because it typically has performance improvements, better support for new features in operating system and hardware, and so on and so forth, right? And I'm not saying to run something like a bleeding edge, but in my skill space, for example, make sure you at least running Percona Server 5.7. PMM is our tool to really help you to visualize and help to understand what's going on inside the database. And we are really continuing work in having PMM provide more usable, actionable data, right? So there is it provides a lot of features, but that's also still something we're working on. And the last thing that I mentioned here is avoid obsessive tuning disorder. What I see, especially if some very smart, excited developers, right, or ops people, they can say, oh my gosh, MySQL has more than 400 tuning variables, right? And there are so many other things I can play with and tune, enable compression for some tables or, and so on and so forth, right? And in this case, you can just sync immense amount of time on the things you just don't matter, and often through that you also can get their MySQL configuration to something not typical one, right, which can reduce your stability.
Okay. And Peter, there's a question about when will the PMM client version 2 Docker image be ready?
Yeah, so we are working on that, on improving the Docker and the Kubernetes support. So I don't have an exact time for you.
So I don't know if anybody has seen this before, but this is how Percona software, and you can kind of copy this for Mongo or even Postgres, as we talk about the things that how we build our software, just so everybody's aware. We start with the community version, so we inherit all of the features and all of the new fixes and things, at that community version. Then we apply critical bug fixes our customer base find. We also work with a lot of really large companies that push the boundaries of whether it's Mongo or MySQL or Postgres, and we bundle those enhancements and those scalability features and those performance features in. We add that. We also take a lot of enterprise features that have been locked behind a paywall or an open core version, and so we'll bring those and we'll create those for the open source version, and then we'll add in features and the best of what's in the open source community. And we bundle all that together, we test it, and then we release it as open source software, and it's freely available. Now, one of the questions was cost benefits, and I think that this is where, I'll go through this really quick. There's direct and indirect cost benefits, right? So, direct cost benefits are, hey, it's open and you can go download it. But it depends on where you're running the software and how you're running it. So there's a lot of implications here. We do have a calculator available, but as you start to think about cost benefits, not only of Percona software but of open source software in general, or where you are in the cloud, keep some things in mind. Can you get the enterprise version for free? Are you going to get locked into an enterprise version? Can you get out? Do you have some portability? Keeping control of your data and your own destiny is important. If you have a faster, more scalable, more performance system, you're going to have less cost because you're going to require less hardware. You're going to require less resources because in the cloud, especially, a lot of people end up scaling through credit card, right? So we'll just go to the next size, the next size, the next size. And that happens so often, it's scary. And what we've found is, you think about it, like every jump in the next generation of cloud instance is a 2x increase generally. And so if you do that, 3, 4, 5 times, that gets really costly. So next question, where is Percona Toolkit? How do I get it? Best place, you can get it on our website. So I put the link here. It's also available in our various repositories. But the other question that came up from both Sean and Keith is they wanted to talk about PXC use cases and potential limitations of PXC. And can we give any sort of preview on what's happening in PMM and what's coming up? So Peter, you wanna jump into this and talk a little bit about PXC?
Yes, of course. I think what is important about PXC or any database software is what there is no silver bullets right out there. If somebody tells you what they've got the silver bullet, run, right? Because there is likely something they're not telling you. And hey, PXC is not different. What Percona XRD cluster PXC provides the clustering with essentially synchronous replication, right? And that really gives you a very good high availability, right? And a guarantee of a node data loss if a cluster node crashes. But that also comes with cost of increased latency to network communications, right? So in case you need that availability and you're happy to pay for that with increased latency for your transactions, PXC is fantastic. If not, well, maybe not so. Now, one of the limitations what Percona XRD cluster classically had is support for large transactions. Like, hey, if I need to update 10 million rows, right, it wasn't working very well. But that particular limitation was removed with Percona XRD cluster 8. So if that was a problem for you, then yeah, check PXC 8 out.
All right, Stuart, and support are like what's some of the common things we see with people running PXC? He's not. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, so it's just about we get a lot of questions about the high failover, high availability with seamless failover, and just making it work, and the read scale out. Yeah, but
it's more like solution help. How do we engineer this to make it more seamless? Things like that.
Yeah, and we get a lot of users of PXC as well. It is a frequent discussion point with customers in tickets.
Okay, great. All right, so next question for us comes from Santosh, who wants to know about the current trends around MongoDB and where is MongoDB going. So MongoDB is an interesting topic because there's been a lot of debate around how open Mongo is, where are they going. So I can tell you a little bit about where I see Mongo going, and then I'll jump over to Peter. So Mongo is all in on Atlas, right? So their business model going forward is really database as a service. Now they're going to continue to have the enterprise versions, but if you start to look at their reported customer base, their financial numbers, the ones who are running more on-prem, more enterprise software is decreasing slightly while the number of Atlas users is increasing. And we're starting to see Mongo kind of emulate Oracle. And so you can actually make the argument potentially that Mongo is trying to be the new Oracle. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that is completely up to you. But what I mean by that is as you start to see where their focus is now starting to shift into being more of a platform company. Back in when Oracle started specifically as a database company, and then they started adding additional tool sets and different business software, and they started to diversify their portfolio. And we're starting to see Mongo move more into that, we're a application development or a platform company where you can design whole platforms around it. And you're going to continue to see that trend, in my opinion. and you're going to continue to see them really double and triple down on the X as a service. In fact, looking at some of their, I spent a weekend reading through their, earnings calls and like, their stock, reports and stuff. It's interesting because they talk about their business model, and their business model is really focused on that X as a service and getting steady quarter over quarter expansion from their customer base, right? So their whole business model is predicated on increasing their revenue every quarter of their customer base. And 21 quarters in a row, they've had 121% or 120+% expansion from their existing customers. And so that's how they're kind of building their model and increasing. Now, Peter, from the technology side and from the open source side, jump in. Where do you see the trends around Mongo and where Mongo is going?
Yeah. Well, I think this is that is very interesting in this case. I think, as I already mentioned, on the community side, I think the MongoDB is a very successful business, but they are and have been forever a reluctant open source company, and they, I think, even more so those days, right? I mean, you can see MongoDB changing the license to something which is SSPL, right? Not really truly open source license. You can see, for example, their CEO talking about saying, hey, you know what, we MongoDB built MongoDB. We don't really expect your community to contribute anything, right? As I mentioned, community is very complicated, right? And I think what MongoDB may continue being successful business, like Oracle has been successful business, like for years, right? But I think what they will be seen less and less as an open source company, right? In this case. And what I am really looking forward and hoping for, there will be some truly alternative solution for MongoDB to appear and get some substantial dent in the marketplace. So far, we have things like DocumentDB, right, from AWS. We have Cosmos DB from Microsoft, right, which have some MongoDB compatibility, but unfortunately, these are not really open source solutions, right? In this case, I think what is also interesting in this case is what we are having the classical open source databases, being that MySQL or Postgres, getting much better, much more useful in working with JSON data. And I see a number of people not jumping right to Mongo those days because of their approach to open source, but staying with those open source databases.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. So, Bob put into the chat, a quote from Mongo, which is open source was a marketing strategy, and more companies in the open source space. Like, it's interesting that the founders of those companies chose it because it was a business strategy, not because they believe in open source. Right, it was just an ends to a means, right? Or a means to an end, where it's like, hey, open source is hot, right? So yeah, it is something that's interesting. So okay, so next question comes from Sumit, and Sumit would like to know about when can we expect to see a Postgres operator, and would also like us to discuss our plans to get more tools, expertise, and solutions around Postgres. Postgres being our newest database here at Percona that we've offered support on, but we've offered it for a while, and so would like to jump into that. So, Peter, you want to answer that?
Yes, sure. Well, if you think about Percona's approach, our approach first and foremost is providing solutions for our customers and a community at large around the open source project. And as I mentioned, the PostgreSQL community is already vibrant, and there is already a lot of stuff which exists in open source community, right? And that means our approach to a different community have to be different, right? To provide the most value of our limited resources. So, for example, if you look at the MongoDB, or actually even MySQL, there was no good open source backup solution, which is kind of an absolutely mandatory thing if you are running database at scale. So we have created Percona Extra Backup, and then we created Percona Backup for MongoDB. In terms of Postgres, there is actually a choice of number of a good backup solutions, right? So instead, we are curating what exists, testing, integrating, and that is something what we include as Percona distribution for Postgres, right? So that has been our approach, because I think that is something which is the most valuable for PostgreSQL community at large, right? If you think there are certain bits and pieces which are missing, drop us a note, right? We would like to hear that. Now, when speaking about a PostgreSQL operator, there is the same story, right? There are actually two, maybe three, very featureful PostgreSQL operators which are already created by community, right? So that is why it was not our first priority to implement that. But at the same time, we are looking to implement that right after we are, to have some spare capacity, right, besides working on MongoDB and MySQL operators.
Okay, great. And so I think this is the last question we got beforehand. So let's go to this. So we had a couple people ask, what are our plans for supporting other databases beyond the ones that we already support, specifically Cassandra, Elastic, Redis, or any of those? And while Peter answers this, if people in chat, if they want to throw in the chat, hey, which database they would like to see next, go for it. Peter, when are we going to add more? We want more databases. People want more.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, this is our plans, but we go kind of slow about that, because my message to the team always, if we enter in a given technology, we want to make sure we do it well, or we don't do it at all. And some of you may know, Percona is not a venture-funded company, really, taking a lot of capital and trying to pursue everything at once is not our way, right? But they are at the same time very customer-driven in our approach. So if especially if you are a Percona customer, besides answering in the chat, I would suggest you to talk to your customer success manager and let them know what technology would be more valuable for you, so we can prioritize it.
Okay, great. So quick reminder, if you haven't taken our open source survey, please do so. It really helps us out. It is anonymous and free, and we give away the data to anyone who wants to use it for research. We've got 3 minutes left. If there's a quick question, I thought I saw a quick question out there around, do we view AWS as an enemy to open source? And I don't think we do at all, but Peter, you wanna answer that, feel free.
Yes, I mean, Percona approach has been always looking from the positive side, right? And there are a lot of businesses which are going to pursue their own business interests, right? And I think that's it's just natural, right? I mean, I'm not expecting some changes in AWS or Oracle behaviors more than I expected a tiger to become vegetarian, right? I mean, is not just going to like, right? And from our side, we are always looking for a way to partner, right? If with everybody to make the open source better, wherever it is. Amazon, right, or other companies, we will encourage everyone to contribute more to open source, right, and right, and really support open source communities more. but we don't see anyone as an enemy.
All right. Great. So there's a question on how to migrate from MySQL 5.6 to 5.7 without downtime. I don't know if we'll be able to answer that in another minute. But maybe you can answer yes or no, Peter. Yes, is there a way to migrate from 5.6 to 5.7 without downtime? I'm sure it is, but
yes, our professional intimacy team has helped customers do it many times.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for coming and for participating and for the questions and the comments. Hopefully, you found this beneficial for everyone and you enjoyed it, and hopefully you would like to see this again, and we'll try to do this once a month or so, and hopefully this is good for everyone. So if you do find this valuable, just say yes or thumbs up or something. We will see you next time.
Okay. Thank you everyone for attending.
All right, thank you.
See you everyone.
See you everybody.